All right, topic 7. So first of all, some definitions. A habitat is where an organism lives, so it could be under a rock, under the ocean, in the desert, or in the Arctic. An organism is an individual is just one organism. A population, so for example, one sheep. A population is many of the same organisms, so like a herd of sheep. Now, a community is many populations together, so a herd of sheep, a flock of chicken, some cows. That's a community. Now, what's an ecosystem? So if you have that community, then you add in the biotic and abiotic factors, that creates an ecosystem. So biotic factors are living factors that affect the survival of a population. So it could be competition, predation, prey, disease, bacteria. Abiotic are non-living things such as pH, temperature, soil, water content, etc. Now, interdependence is when organisms rely on one another. So, for example, we can see that water spider consumes mayfly larvae, which consumes the algae. So we know water spider relies on algae because if there was no algae, there'll be no mayfly larvae. If there's no mayfly larvae, then the water spider dies. So we can see that organisms are linked together. This, by the way, is a food web. A food web shows many food chains and how they interact with one another. So, for example, if I go from algae to mayfly larvae to stickleback to pike, that's a food chain. A food web shows many food chains. Now, a stable community is a community in which the amount of material going in is equal to the amount of material going out. So, for example, the number of organisms being born equals the number of organisms dying. So that's stable. So the numbers remain the same. Now, adaptations are features of an organism that allow it to survive in a particular environment. And they can fall into 3 categories. Structural, which is part of their bodies. For example, a camel's hump or blubber on a whale, or white fur, which allows camouflage, or big ears on an elephant. Those are all structural adaptations. Then you have behavioral, so how an organism acts. For example, birds migrate to a new climate, or penguins huddle together to keep warm, or elephants flap their ears to cool themselves down, or splash water over themselves. That's all behavioral. And then you have functional. Functional is processes within their body. So, for example, when bears in the winter, they hibernate. So that means they go into a deep sleep, their metabolic rate drops, the speed of chemical reactions drop. So again, they conserve food. Now again, hibernation is not part of their body structure, and it's not part of their behavior. It's because it's mainly to do with chemical reactions within their body. Also, camels, for example, they produce concentrated urine. So that means their kidneys are very effective at reabsorbing water from the urine. Again, this part of their kidneys, it's a functional adaptation. Okay, extremophiles are bacteria or microorganisms that can live in very harsh environments, such as under the sea, where there is a high pressure and high temperature. So these guys can live there. Food chains shows the direction of energy transfer. So, for example, all energy on this planet for life comes from the sun. The producers take the energy, they turn it into chemicals, and that gets transferred from producers into primary consumers and then into secondary consumers. Now, although you can see that energy is being transferred, you can see the number of organisms are starting to drop. So, for example, 5,000 dandelions are consumed by 100 rabbits, which are then consumed by 1 fox. Why does this happen? The reason this happens is because energy is lost between the different levels due to respiration, movement, excretion, or even energy is turned into inedible parts such as teeth and bones. So, for example, energy is turned into bones. The fox does not eat the bones of the rabbit. So, again, not all the energy gets transferred to the next level. Predator-prey cycles look like this. So this is the prey and that's the predator. And you can see that over time, the populations of both of them fluctuate. And you can also see that they're out of sync. They're not synchronized. So, for example, when rabbits go up, then after a while, foxes begin to go up. When foxes go up, then rabbits begin to go down. Because obviously there's loads of foxes eating them. Now, because there's less rabbits, then of course foxes begin to die because there's less food for them. So foxes go down. When foxes go down, now rabbits can grow again, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason they're out of phase is because it takes time for each population to respond and reproduce. So if they ask you that, that's the answer. Out of phase because it takes time to respond and reproduce. Okay, a quadra is used to estimate a population size. So, for example, if you want to work out the number of daffodils in the park behind your house, you can use a quadrat. This is a quadrat. It's a 1 meter by 1 meter square frame. So how would you explain that? What the points you would mention? You would say the following. Step 1, you draw a map of the area. Then pick random coordinates from the map. Then go in real life, go there, place the quadrat on those coordinates, count the number of organisms inside the quadrat, repeat for all the different coordinates that you have picked, then calculate a mean. So for example, imagine your mean was 6 daffodils per meter squared, because remember a quadrat is 1 meter by 1 meter, so that's 6 per meter squared. Now let's say the total park was 100 meters squared. So that means the total population is going to be the mean, which is 6 per meter squared, times by total area, which was 100. So it's going to be 600 daffodils. A transect is used to estimate distribution patterns across a habitat. So, for example, let's say it won't ask you to say, oh, how many daffodils there are, but instead it will say to you, if you go from the west side of the park to the east side of the park, what happens to the number of daffodils? How does the distribution change? So what you do is, in a transect, you have 2 points and you join them by a line. And then what you do is, you start from one side, you place your quadrat, you count the organisms within the quadrat, then you flip, you count, and you keep on flipping until you get to the end of the line. And then you compare this with the other area. Okay, the water cycle, quite straightforward. So imagine energy from the sun causes evaporation from the oceans and also transpiration from plants. Water vapor then goes up, it condenses to form clouds. Then it keeps condensing furthermore until it forms heavier clouds. The water molecules get closer together, they become heavier. This is called precipitation. And then the water molecules begin to rain down. And as it rains down, it goes down the mountains and it goes back into the oceans, or it gets picked up by plants again. And this keeps on repeating itself. Now, the carbon cycle is also quite important. Carbon dioxide in the air is taken in by plants via photosynthesis. The plants respire, they release carbon dioxide back up. So here, there's one cycle already. Or, let's say the plant makes fruits. Those fruits can be eaten by animals, and now animals respire. So again, carbon dioxide is released. So here's another cycle. Or the animals die, or they release waste products, and microorganisms consume them, and again, they release carbon dioxide. So there's the other cycle. Now, when microorganisms consume them, they don't eat everything. So, for example, bones, they remain behind. And bones over millions of years turn into fossil fuels. Fossil fuels can be burnt, and that releases carbon dioxide. If they ask you what is the longest stage in the carbon cycle, the longest stage will be carbon dioxide from the air going like this, from plants into fossil fuels and then back out. That's the longest process. Okay, again, all those points mentioned here. Now, if I was to say to you, you have a park with only these animals, or this, and you have another park with these animals, which one would you say is more diverse? Of course, you would say the one on the right. So biodiversity is a measure of how much variety there is of different species of organisms within an ecosystem. Okay, so that's the definition. Make sure you memorize that. Now, humans' activity is actually reducing biodiversity. What are humans doing? One is deforestation. So they are cutting down trees. If they cut down trees, there's less habitats for plants to live. Also, humans are producing waste and polluting water. Animals that live in there will begin to die. And also, global warming is ruining migration patterns. And we'll talk about that in a second. So human beings are basically reducing biodiversity. How do we maintain biodiversity? Number one, have breeding programs. So for example, let's say pandas are endangered. We collect them, we protect them, and we allow them to breed. Also have protected habitats, so animals are not allowed, like humans don't go in there and start killing them for the resources. Prevent deforestation. And finally, reduce, reuse, and recycle. So all of these are ways that you can maintain biodiversity. But why don't we do that? The reason is because it wastes government money. So imagine, let's say the government spends a lot of money building protected areas. It could use that money to use other stuff, for example, for the NHS. Also, if there's less deforestation, there'll be more unemployment because people are required for deforestation. So people will lose jobs. The other reason is some animals should not be protected. For example, let's say some people believe that rats, for example, they waste. Rats, they eat our crops, so let's not protect them. Let's get rid of them. Also, land is in high demand. So right now, a lot of people, a lot of companies will clear up these areas so they can build buildings and homes. So for that reason, a lot of companies want to still continue destroying land. Yeah. Global warming is caused by greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane. So infrared radiation is released from the sun. It hits the planet, it gets absorbed by the planet and then tries to go out, but carbon dioxide and methane prevent it from going out, and it gets stored and it keeps staying within the planet. What's the consequence of global warming? Number one, it can cause polar ice caps to melt, so polar bears obviously begin to die, or other animals in those areas. It means that there's unpredictable weather, so you can't grow crops. It also means that the planet's temperature is changing, so that means that migration patterns will be affected by birds, and also unpredictable weather.